I want to start today with a sound, because if you have ever built the wrong building, you already know this one. It is February. Sleet, not snow, the kind we get down here that nobody up north would even call weather, but that shuts this county down for 2 days. You come out at 7 in the morning to pull a bale, and the whole roof is roaring with it, that hard tin sound that fills your chest up. And underneath it, you hear the other thing. Drip. Not a leak. I want to be clear about that, because I got up on a ladder and I checked. That roof did not leak. That was condensation coming off the underside of bare metal, gathering into a bead, letting go, and landing on the hood of a tractor I paid real money for. Drip. Drip. And you stand there in the doorway with your hand shoved down in your coat, and you do the arithmetic you have done 100 mornings, and the number you land on is $21,000. Because that was the new barn. That was the good one. That was the one I built to fix everything I got wrong the first time. Now here is the part that makes this video worth your time. I have built 2 barns on this place. The first one I built wrong. It cost me about $4,800 to put up, and somewhere north of $3,000 in patches and aggravation across 10 years. The second one I built wrong too. It cost me $21,000 to put up, and better than $9,000 in fixes since. And there are 2 things about it I will never be able to fix at all. Same man, same county, same dirt. 10 years of hard experience in between. And I made the second mistake bigger, more expensive, and a whole lot harder to undo. That is not a story about lumber. That is a story about how a person makes decisions, and I have watched enough of my neighbors do the exact same thing that I decided it was worth an hour of your time and mine. So today, I am going to lay it out straight. I am going to tell you what the real barn question actually is. Why almost everybody measures the wrong number, and the 7 things that decided what those 2 buildings truly cost me. We will count them down from 7 to 1, and number 1 is the one that cost me more than the roof, the doors, the concrete, and the dirt work put together. Then at the end, I will tell you exactly what I would build today if I were standing on a bare spot with $10,000 in a pencil, and in what order I would spend it. And I will tell you what I would spend the first $500 on, which is not a thing you can stand inside of. Now before we go any farther, I need to say a few things, and I would appreciate it if you did not skip them. America is a big country, and a barn in East Texas is not a barn in Minnesota or Arizona. My enemy is water, humidity, and heat. Yours might be snow load, which is a structural question and not a comfort question. Yours might be wind. Yours might be frost depth, which changes everything about how a post goes in the ground. The bones of what I am telling you travel just fine. The particulars do not. Second, and this is the one folks skip and then pay for, find out what your county actually requires before you drive a single stake. Permits, setbacks off the property line, floodplain maps, easements, whether an agricultural exemption applies to what you are building, whether it changes your property tax, and whether your insurance will even cover a structure you put up yourself. That is a phone call to the county and a phone call to your agent. 2 phone calls. I have watched a man tear down a beautiful building because he set it 11 feet off a line that needed 25, and the county did not care one bit how good his framing was. Third, On anything holding a roof over your head or your family or your animals, get a professional involved. Trusses, spans, post depth, footings, and anchoring are engineering, not opinion. And a barn that comes down in a storm is not a bad day. It is a funeral. And electrical in a farm building, around dust and hay and animals, is not the place to save $200. Licensed electrician, proper conduit, proper boxes, done right the first time. Barns burn. I have stood in a neighbor's driveway at 2 in the morning and watched one go, and there is nothing to do at that point but keep the trucks back and hope the wind holds. All right, now let us talk about the number everybody gets wrong. Most folks think the barn question is about square feet and price. It is not. Price per square foot is just the part you can fit in a text message. Every man I have ever talked to about a building starts in the exact same place. What did it run you a foot? And I understand why. It is the only number that is easy to get and easy to compare, so that is the one that goes around the feed store like a piece of gossip. But a building does not cost you what you paid for it. A building costs you what you paid for it, plus every single thing it makes you do for the next 20 years. Every step you take around it because the door is on the wrong end. Every hour with a shovel because the water comes in. Every board you replace because the bottom of the wall sits in mud 6 months out of the year. Every trip up a ladder. Every load you cannot get through the opening, so you unload outside and hand carry it in 40 times a year for 2 decades. That is the real number, and almost nobody writes it down. I have known men who could tell you to the dollar what their building cost and could not tell you that they have walked an extra 60 feet 4 times a day, every day, for 11 years because the feed room ended up on the wrong side. That was me. For a good long while, that was exactly me. Because here's what happened. My first barn was cheap, and everybody told me I did good. 24 by 30, mostly used pipe I got when a fella tore out a set of pins, 10 off a chicken house they took down over in the next county, and about $1,800 of actual new lumber. All in, $4,800. And I was proud of that number, and I said it out loud to anybody who slowed down. By the sticker, the first barn won. By what it cost me to own it, the second one lost so badly it is not funny. And the difference was not in the materials. The difference was about 6 decisions I made in the first 2 hours of the project, before anybody ever picked up a saw. That is what this whole countdown is about. So here we go. 7 things that decided what those 2 buildings really cost me, counting down. Number 7, where I put it, which I decided in about 4 minutes. Let us start with the one that is free to get right and expensive forever if you get it wrong. The first barn I cited by convenience. I stood in the yard, looked at a flat-looking spot about 90 feet off the back porch, and said, "There." I did not walk it in the rain. I did not look at where the water goes. I did not think about the tree line, or which way the wind comes from in August, or where a truck and trailer would have to swing to back in. 4 minutes, maybe less. Here is what that flat-looking spot actually was. It was the low side of a very slight rise, and about 150 feet of pasture drained across it. You could not see that on a dry day. You could see it fine the first time we caught 3 inches in an afternoon, when the whole north end of that barn had a 1/4 inch of moving water running through it, and my hay was sitting on pallets in a creek. Now here's the part that ought to make you laugh at me. When I built the second barn 10 years later, a grown man with the lesson already in his pocket, I sighted it in about 20 minutes. Better, not good. I got it up out of the drainage that time, and I was pleased with myself about it. What I did not do was think about the approach. I set that building so the big door faces east, because that is how it looked right from the porch, and east is exactly where my driveway is not. So every load of hay that comes onto this place has to get backed in at an angle across a corner of yard that turns to grease when it is wet. Twice I have had a delivery driver bury a truck doing it, and one of those times I paid a fella $80 to come pull him out because it was my fault and I knew it. Sight is free. Sight is the cheapest decision in the entire project and the only one you can never take back. You can add a door. You can add power. You can pour a floor later. You cannot move a building off a bad spot without paying most of what it costs to build it in the first place. So walk it. Walk it in the rain specifically, because a place tells the truth about itself in the rain and lies to you every other day of the year. Walk it with a tape. Stake the corners. Leave the stakes a week and go look at 'em morning and evening. Drive your truck up to it like you have got a 30-foot trailer behind you and see if the swing works. Watch where the water goes. Where the water goes is not negotiable, and it does not care what you have planned. Number 6. The dirt work I skipped both times. This one sits at number 6 on my list, and it is probably number 1 in dollars. And the only reason it is not up top is that I want you to hear something else at the end. Do not let its place fool you. Both times I looked at a bid for dirt work and I thought, that is a lot of money for nothing. That is the exact phrase I used. A lot of money for nothing. Because dirt work is the only thing you buy that you cannot see when it is finished. You write a check, a fella shows up with a machine and makes noise for a day, and when he leaves, the spot looks about like it did before, only browner. First barn, no pad at all. I set posts in native ground and built on top of it. That building sat dead level with the pasture around it for its whole life, which meant every hard rain washed a little more of the world into it, and the bottom 18 inches of everything I ever stored in there stayed damp. Second barn, I did get a pad. And I will be honest with you, I got a cheap one. The good bid was $2,100, and the fella who would do it for $900 could come next week. I took the $900 and next week. What I got for $900 was dirt pushed up into a shape. What I did not get was proper material, brought in and compacted in lifts, crowned so it sheds water, sitting on a base that does not move. And down here, we have got clay that swells when it is wet and shrinks when it is dry. And a pad that is not built right will do a slow dance under your building for years. The slab I poured on top of that pad cracked in 3 places inside of 2 years. Not hairline cracks. One of them you can catch a boot toe on. And a cracked slab is not just ugly. It holds water in the crack, it makes a spot that will never come clean, and it keeps right on opening. Fixing that properly after the fact means tearing out concrete, which is money and noise and a dumpster and a week of my life. So I have not fixed it. I have lived with it for 8 years, and I will live with it as long as I own this place. Because I saved $1,200 one Tuesday afternoon. Here is how I say it now, and I have said it to 4 different neighbors, and 2 of them actually listened. The building is the part you can fix. The ground under it is the part you cannot. Spend your money from the bottom up, not the top down. Nobody has ever walked into a barn and admired a pad. And every man who has got a bad one thinks about it every single week of his life. Number 5, the doors, which is where I threw money at the wrong problem. All right, doors. The first barn had one opening 10 feet wide with a homemade slider running on cheap hardware. It was too narrow the day I finished it. My tractor with a bale on the front cleared it by inches if I came in perfectly straight. And I did not always come in perfectly straight. And there is a gouge in that post to prove it. And that door came off its track about every 18 months. That grinding sound of steel dragging across a header is a sound I could pick out of a crowd today. So when I built barn number 2, I fixed the door problem. 16-foot opening, a real roll-up, the whole business. Cost me a good deal more than a slider, and I felt like a man who had learned something. Here is what I got wrong, and it is the same mistake wearing a clean shirt. I made the one opening bigger. I never once asked how many openings I needed, or where they belonged. That second barn has one big door on the east end and one people-sized door on the south, and that is the whole list. Which means air does not move through it, and I will get to what that cost me in a minute. It means when the big door is shut against weather, the only way in with a wheelbarrow is around the whole building. And it means the hay side and the shop side share one doorway, so I spend my life moving one thing to get at another thing. What I actually needed was a big opening on both ends, so a truck can pull straight through instead of backing in, and a wide man door on the side nearest the house, because 90% of my trips into that barn do not require opening a 16-foot door in a north wind. A second opening framed in during the build is a few $100s in one afternoon. Cutting one into a finished metal building later means header work, trim, and a fellow who knows exactly what he is doing. And the quote I got to do it after the fact was better than $2,000. Which is why there still is not one. And one practical note on roll-ups, since I have got you here. In a dusty building, a roll-up needs looking after. Mine started binding in year 3, and I was sure it was broken. It was not broken. It was full of the entire county. Grease, dirt, and a track nobody had laid a hand on since the day it went in. Number 4, ventilation, and the drip I told you about at the top. Now we are back where we started. That drip on the tractor hood was the single most expensive lesson in this whole video, and here is why it happened. Warm, wet air inside a building rises up and hits cold metal, and it gives its water up right there on the underside of the roof. That is all condensation is. It does not need a hole. It does not need bad workmanship. All it needs is bare metal, humid air, and no way for that air to leave. My first barn was open-sided and drafty as a hat rack, and it never once did this. It was miserable in a north wind, and things blew around in it, and my hat left the property more than one time. But the air moved, and that roof stayed dry. My second barn I built tight. 4 walls, doors that seal, because I was good and tired of the wind. And I put no ridge vent in it, no intake down low, and nothing at all under the tin. So what I built for $21,000 was a very nice sealed box that makes its own rain. I lost a set of tools to rust before I even understood what was happening. And I mean the good sockets, the ones I had been buying a piece at a time for years. Some hay went off on the top of the stack. And the morning I found surface rust on that tractor hood is the morning I finally called somebody who knew more than I did. The fix after the fact was a ridge vent cut into a finished roof plus intake added down low. And that came to right around $3,100 with labor, because it is up-high work on slick metal, and that is no longer a job for a man my age on a ladder. Doing it during the build, the vent and the closures would have been a few $100s in material and no extra labor at all, because those men were already up there. There is also insulated sheeting, and there is a vapor barrier you can lay under the panels as they go on, and either one handles this if you decide on it before the roof goes up. Talk to your supplier about which is right where you live, because the answer in a dry state is not the answer here. But understand the principle, because the principle is the same everywhere. A building needs air coming in low and air going out high, and it needs a clear path between the two. Tight is not the goal. Dry is the goal. And in a barn, those two things fight each other. And here is the hard part. Said out loud. I spent extra money making that building tighter, and the tightness was the problem. That is what I mean when I say the second mistake cost me more. My first barn's flaw was free, and it corrected itself. My second barn's flaw I paid for on purpose, with a check, feeling smart about it. Number 3, the floor, and the argument nobody ever settles. Dirt or concrete? Everybody has got an opinion on this one, and most of them are about half right. The first barn had a dirt floor because I could not afford anything else, and I will tell you honestly, for hay and for animals, it was fine. Better than fine in some ways. It is soft on legs, it drains if the ground around it drains, and it costs you exactly nothing. What a dirt floor is bad at is being a shop. You cannot sweep it. You will never in your life find a dropped bolt in it. And it wicks moisture up into whatever is standing on it, so everything metal near the ground rusts from the bottom up, quietly while you are not looking. So on barn number 2, I poured concrete across the whole thing, wall to wall, because I had spent 10 years hunting bolts in the dirt, and I was done with it. Which is the right call for the shop side, and the wrong call for the animal side. And I did not think about it that way, because I was thinking about the building instead of thinking about the jobs the building has to do. That is a distinction worth writing down somewhere. A building is not a thing. A building is a list of jobs with a roof over it. 3 things I would tell my younger self, standing there with the ready-mix truck already turning off the highway. 1. Pour it up. A slab ought to sit proud of the grade around it, and the ground outside ought to fall away from it, so that water has an opinion about where to go, and that opinion is not inside. Mine is barely above the dirt on the north side, and in a hard rain it still takes water. In a $21,000 building. I want you to sit with that one a second, because I have had to. 2. Put a vapor barrier under it. Concrete poured straight onto bare ground pulls moisture up through itself forever. It will make a shop floor sweat every spring, and it will make everything in that building faintly damp in a way you cannot explain to anybody until somebody finally explains it to you. Mine sweats. It has sweat for 8 years. Every March I walk in there and the floor looks like somebody mopped it, and nobody mopped it. 3. Get the thickness and the reinforcement right for what is actually going to sit on it. A tractor is not a car. A loaded trailer parked on one corner all winter is a point load. That is a conversation to have with a concrete outfit before they back up, and it is not the place to shave $200 off the number. And here is what the floor really cost me, and this one is not a dollar figure at all. Concrete is the most permanent thing you will ever do on a piece of property, short of a house. You can move a wall, you can cut in a door, you can add a vent, and I did, and it hurt, but I did it. A slab at the wrong height, the wrong thickness, in the wrong place, is there until somebody shows up with a machine and a bad attitude and a bill you are not going to enjoy. One more thing on the animal side since I brought it up. If I had it to do again, I would pour the shop end and the alley and leave the stalls on packed clay with good bedding over it, Concrete understanding animals means mats, and mats mean money. And it is harder on legs and joints than folks want to admit. Talk to your vet about what is right for the stock you actually keep, because the answer for a horse and the answer for a couple of feeder calves are not the same answer. Number 2, power and water, which I was going to add later. Later is the most expensive word in construction. I would like it painted on a sign over the door. Both buildings, I told myself the very same thing. Get it up, get it dried in, run power later when there is money. And later came both times. And both times it cost me several times over what it would have cost to do it while the walls were still open and the trench was still fresh. The first barn ran on an extension cord for 6 years. 6 years. A cord out the back door of the shop, laying across open ground that got run over, that got chewed on by something, that got unplugged every time somebody at the house needed that outlet for a weed eater. It is a fire hazard, and I knew it was a fire hazard, and I did it anyway, because it worked. And working is the enemy of fixing. That is a whole sermon right there, and I will spare you the rest of it. The second barn, I did run a proper service, but I ran it after the interior was closed in, which means surface conduit on everything, and an electrician's invoice with a line item that may as well have read, "Because you called me late." And then, having spent all that money, I underbuilt it. 2 circuits and 4 outlets in a 30 by 40 building, because standing there in an empty barn, I genuinely could not picture what I would ever need more for. Then I bought a welder. Then I put a chest freezer out there. Then I wanted a fan, and then 2 fans, and then lights bright enough to actually find a cotter pin on a dark floor at 5 in the evening in December. Every single one of those was another call, another minimum charge, another morning of me standing around holding a flashlight for a man half my age. Here is my rule now, and I paid for it twice so you can have it free. Run more than you think you need, in conduit, while the walls are open. Outlets every 10 or 12 feet at bench height, not down at the floor where you will be crawling around behind a freezer with a light in your teeth. 1 circuit that never gets loaded up with anything else, lighting on its own. And put the panel somewhere you can actually reach without moving 3 things first, because the day you need that panel in a hurry is not going to be a calm day. Water is the same story with a colder ending. I hand-carried buckets to that first barn for years, and buckets are how a man finds out exactly how old he is. A frost-proof hydrant set while the trencher is already sitting on your property is a small fraction of what it costs to bring that machine back out on its own trip for one little job. And ask locally about frost depth and freeze protection, because down here that is one answer, in 4 states north it is a completely different one. Getting it wrong means a busted line under a slab, which might be the worst sentence in this entire video. And number 1. The thing that cost me more than the roof, the concrete, the doors, and the dirt work put together. All right, number 1. The problem was not the building. The problem was that I never wrote down what the building was supposed to do. That is number 1. I built both of those barns without a list. Now, I had plans. I want to be clear about that, because folks hear no plan, and they picture a man with a hammer and a dream. I had a nice set of drawings for the second one, elevations, a materials takeoff. I had a number, and I had a spot, and I had a crew lined up. What I did not have, either time, was 1 sheet of paper that said what happens in this building, and how often, and by who. That sounds soft, I know it does. It is the single most expensive thing on this list, and I will show you exactly why. Because if I had written that list, it would have said something like this: Hay comes in on a gooseneck 4 times a year, and the driver is not going to want to back in. I go to the feed barrel twice a day, 365 days a year, and half of those it is dark. I work on equipment maybe 20 days a year, but when I do, I need light and power and room to swing a wrench. Somebody is going to have to push a wheelbarrow from here to there when it is raining sideways. And I am going to be 68 years old in this building, and then 75. And the man I am then is not going to want to walk around the outside of it in the wet. Every single mistake in this video falls straight out of that one sheet of paper. The door faces the wrong way because I never wrote down that hay comes in on a gooseneck. The feed room is on the far side because I never counted up that I walk to it 700 times a year. The ventilation is wrong because I never wrote down that I intend to store metal tools in a humid climate. The power is thin because I never wrote down the words, "I will probably buy a welder someday," which I absolutely knew about myself the whole time. I did not need to be a better builder. The men who put that barn up did fine work. It is square, it is solid, it will outlive me, and it is wrong. I needed to be a better customer of my own self. And here's the thing about doing it twice. The first barn I can forgive. I was young and broke, and I built what I could afford in the spot I could reach with what I could scrounge. And there is honor in that. Everybody starts somewhere. The second barn, I had 10 years of daily evidence. Every one of those problems had been hollering at me 4 times a day for a decade. I walked around the outside of that first barn in the rain more times than I can count. I knew. I had the whole list in my body, and I never once put it on paper. And because I did not, I spent $21,000 building a nicer version of the same misunderstanding. That is what I mean when I say the second time cost more. It was not just the bigger check. It was that 10 years of experience did not save me 1 dime because I never bothered to write the experience down. So that is number 1. Not the pad, not the vent, not the doors. The list. All right, now let me tell you what I would do today. Say I am standing on a bare spot with $10,000 and a pencil. The first $500 does not buy any building at all. It buys 2 phone calls to the county, an hour with somebody who knows drainage and soils on my particular dirt, and a bundle of stakes that sit in the ground for a month while I walk them in every kind of weather this county can throw. If that sounds like a waste of $500 to you, go back and add up what my 4 minutes cost me. Then, in this order, dirt work first, and I would take the higher bid. The pad is the building. Everything above it is just what you set on the pad. I would rather have a small building on good ground than a big one sitting on clay somebody pushed into a shape. And I have owned both, so that is not a guess. Second, the shell, and smaller than I want. Here is why. Every man I know who built big and cheap, and then spent 15 years in a building that is drafty and wet and falling apart around the edges. I would rather have 24 by 36 done properly than 40 by 60 done thin. You can always add a lean-to onto a good building. You cannot add quality onto a bad one. Third, the openings. And I want 2 of them big and on opposite ends, plus a wide man door on the side facing the house. Pull-through beats back-in every day of your life, and the man door is the one you will use 10 times a day for 20 years, so put it where your feet already want to go. Fourth, ventilation. Decided before the roof goes up, not after. Ridge vent, intake down low, and a conversation with a supplier about a barrier or insulated panel for my climate. This is a couple $100 at the right moment and $3,000 at the wrong one, and I have the receipt for both. Fifth, conduit and a water line in the ground while the machine is still on the property. Even if I cannot afford the fixtures yet, empty conduit is cheap. Trenching twice is not. And the floor comes last, on purpose, because it is the thing you can add later without tearing anything out. And because by the time you have used the building for a season, you will know exactly where you want it and where you do not. Notice what that order is. It is bottom to top, and it is permanent to temporary. Spend hardest on what you can never change. Go cheap on what you can fix on a Saturday. Now, one last thing, and then I will let you go. I am not tearing down that barn. It is a good building with 4 bad decisions in it, and it is going to be standing here long after somebody else's name is on the deed. I put a fan in it. I got the vent cut in. I keep the good tools in a cabinet with a bag of desiccant in it like some kind of city person, and I laugh at myself every time I open it. But if you are watching this, and you have got a bare spot and a number in your head, I am asking you for one thing. Before you call anybody, go sit at the kitchen table with a piece of paper and write down what happens in that building. Not what it looks like, what happens in it, and how many times a year, and by who, and how old that person is going to be. That sheet of paper is worth more than every dollar in this video. I got it wrong. Twice. You have got no good reason to get it wrong even once. If you have built one and there is something in it that makes you shake your head every morning, put it down in the comments. I read them, and I have learned more from other folks' bad doors than I ever learned from my own good ideas. Y'all take care of each other, and go walk your spot in the rain.